Before I get started on our panel discussion, though, today's program has been made possible through the support of Victoria's startup agency LaunchVic, the Victorian Department of Jobs, Skills, Industry and Regions, Advance Queensland Department of Tourism, Innovation and Sport, New Industries Fund by the Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation Western Australia. ASTN also recognises our delivery partner, Cremorne Digital Hub, known as the CDH. ASTN and CDH are both located in Victoria's digital innovation gateway with the aim to foster connections and facilitate stronger collaborations. Our three guests coming up now that will be part of our panel discussion that will be co-moderated by Henry and Martin. First of all, Matthew Clunies-Ross, CDH Director and Artesian Partner. Matthew co-founded Artesian in 2004 and is the Chief Investment Officer, as well as being responsible for the firm's global fixed income business. Matthew also sits on the investment committee of several Artesian VC funds. With Matthew's experience across both asset classes, it enables him to provide oversight into the operations of the global funds management business. Prior to Artesian, Matthew worked in investment banking at Macquarie Bank, HSBC and ANZ. He has a Bachelor of Economics from Monash University and a graduate diploma in financial planning from Deakin University. Chris Smiles is the co-founder of Smartform Architecture. Chris co-founded Smartform and brings over 20 years experience in the design and delivery of award-winning projects from major sports and entertainment precincts and transport infrastructure to iconic landmark structures as well, visitor attractions and cultural projects. He has been leading the sports planning and architecture for Melbourne's $225 million Marvel Stadium upgrade and currently is involved in the NBL project. Shane Ridley, Partnership Development Manager, Melbourne Connect. In his role as Partnership Development Manager, Shane leverages his broad base of knowledge to foster industry collaboration and facilitate research, innovation and commercialisation. Shane has a double major in chemistry and mineral science from Murdoch University and completed his MBA at the University of Western Australia. He co-founded a multidisciplinary data science startup that provided solutions, control systems, engineering and bespoke software development. So I would really love to welcome Shane, Chris and Matthew to our first panel discussion, which will be co-moderated by Henry and Martin.
Good. Thank you, Sarah, and welcome everyone, Matt, Chris and Shane, to our discussion now. And Henry, you told us about Eindhoven and what I think what's now known as the Brainport, that former Philips research facility. So Matt, with that background, can you give us an overview what CDH is or wants to be?
Yeah, sure. Good to be here. So the Cremorne Digital Hub, CDH, I think the genesis of the idea happened, or what they tell me happened about 10 years ago when just organically a lot of big digital companies were conglomerating or moving their offices to this little 700 square metre patch just near the CBD. Then people started looking around and saying to themselves, we've got something special here. Now, how do we actually activate something even bigger and better? 10 years later, the government also realised there was a potential to create a globally significant innovation and digital hub in this place, given that by that point, in that 700 square metre little space, there's companies with a combined market cap in the digital space of about $50 billion plus. So they put out an RFP or a request for proposal, which was pretty broad, and invited bids from consortiums to basically operate this hub or this hub idea. As a venture capitalist, we saw this as an opportunity, given it was a pretty broad or blank bit of paper, to do something a little different. I mean, the key here is to not just have another noise factory or innovation theatre type situation. We had to have something real that had a good chance of achieving all the outcomes and all those motivations that were pretty heady sort of ideas to actually create a globally significant innovation precinct. So we approached University of Melbourne, RMIT, a lot of the big corporations in the area who were obviously key to the success of the hub itself, and realised that if we could get everyone fully aligned, and from our perspective, we needed this to be a for-profit proprietary limited company where people actually bought their shares and then were obviously motivated to make it work, given there was skin in the game. And that was the basis of our proposition. And by bringing in venture capital, which is us, the universities, and all those corporations, we thought, and look, we weren't using the word open innovation specifically, but this is obviously an open innovation project. And the idea was to bring all these things together and catalyse and activate open innovation in itself. So we ended up being successful in winning that tender or RFP. So now we have a company that has those three universities, ourselves, and Car Sales, which is the big digital marketplace for cars, REA, and another institute called Bendigo Kangan, which is a vocational training centre. Key for us now is obviously to do all those things that we've set out to do. Everyone has slightly different motivations within the consortium. But generally speaking, it does come back to, again, that open innovation idea of collaborating, looking beyond your own organisation to other ways of innovating, distributing that knowledge across those different sectors, those different motivated partners. And making something a lot better and bigger than what we have now. I mean, we've always thought that Victoria has all these fantastic components and ingredients. One of the top 5 university cities in the world, 300,000 students, a burgeoning VC industry. I mean, Artesian has invested in around 600 companies across Asia Pacific. There's no shortage of activity. There's no shortage of positive thinking. And then these incredible digital corporations all within a few hundred meters of each other. So it's all there, but we need to actually organise it in a way that we do actually get better outcomes. And from our perspective, venture capital, we're after a bigger and better pipeline, more de-risked investments, more companies that are growing, that actually have customers, that understand how to talk to customers. We believe that with all the talent, and if we can actually direct that in a better way, with all the corporations who obviously have the need to look at disruptive technologies. I mean, they were the original disruptors, these big incumbent digital companies, and then obviously the backing of the Victorian government, then we'll have a much better chance of having some much better companies to invest in. And that's probably, in essence, our major motivation.
Yeah. So in other words, when you talked about the request for proposal, and this goes back to Margaret's question, there's initial funding that comes from the state government in this case for CDH to get started effectively, right?
That's right. So there was a $10 million amount from the Victorian government, and that's supposed to be spent over the next 4 years. All those shareholders have put money in as well to buy shares. So there is like a reasonable amount of capital, and everyone will have a different opinion on whether that's a lot or a little. I mean, some of the hubs around the world, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars go in. So you could say it's small, but we are also looking at, and this is the key, is to launch the Cremorne Venture Fund. The point of that is to obviously bring things together more materially, that is, we'll have funds to actually invest in the companies that are attracted, scaled up, developed, created in association with the Cremorne Digital Hub. Sort of doing what we're doing now, but really supercharging it, given we are going to take advantage of these open innovation sort of ideas and take advantage of all these partners actually collaborating a lot more, and the communication being just so much better. I mean, just the university corporation relationship, everyone's trying hard to make it work, given everyone realizes that we've got the talent and some great corporations, but there is still a pretty large disconnect there. And, you always hear these stories about, a really bright idea or a little startup that might go into, that might be developed by a university. They introduce them to a corporation, they give them the pitch, and the corporation says, well, I don't really want that, but can you do this? And the little startup goes, no. And that's the last time they ever talk to each other. Everyone gets a little disheartened, and they go back to their little their separate ways. So we're trying to improve that that dynamic. We think we can, and we think we can because we actually do have motivated parties, and they're motivated in the right way, which we believe is profit. So let's see how we go. I mean, it's still early days.
Yeah. But Matthew, you spoke about universities being partner of that, and Shane, let me bring you into this conversation, because obviously University of Melbourne, besides RMIT, is a partner in CDH. And what do you see is going to change from a university perspective by being involved or embracing an open innovation activity this way?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Martin. And I just wanted to say thanks to ASN for putting on the event and for asking us to speak. Very glad to be here today. It's really, I suppose, where we come from at Melbourne Connect, very much part of the open innovation paradigm. And we kind of see, the society as a whole changing. If you look at the role of a university traditionally, we've kind of seen ourselves as repositories of knowledge, as these kind of bastions, these where all the smarts, all the ideas are kept. And I think that, historically, we've always kind of pursued this kind of discovery-focused event. We've always looked to, be curiosity-led, and that's kind of led over time to the formation of silos, where, we dig deeper holes, we get deeper knowledge in one specific area, but it really kind of leads to this siloing. And so that's kind of historically led to us taking more of a tech transfer approach, where we're pushing technology from research, and we're trying to find markets where we can kind of push that tech to. And so that's really led to, I suppose, to a focus on commercialization. And so we're getting to the point now where the world has changed, and there's the new ways for us to operate, and the university is really looking to kind of embrace how do we open up and how do we kind of extend past our traditional boundaries, the organizational boundaries, as Henry's described earlier today. And how do we really engage with the wider ecosystem, and how do we kind of open up new opportunities? And so our idea to invest with Cremorne's, with some other universities as well, is really a great example of open innovation in action. We see this as kind of, the rising tide that lifts all boats in the kind of Victorian or the Melbourne kind of ecosystem. And really, that's something that we're keen to kind of pursue and work up further.
And so very specifically, I mean, Matt, you were talking, it's early days, but Chris, you will be actually sharing one of these early projects, which the ASTN is also involved in, is about a different approach to a specific facility in basketball. And that obviously involves partners of CDH. So Chris, can you give us an overview what that project is and how that actually puts things into reality?
Absolutely. Thanks, Martin, and likewise, thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel discussion today. As Sarah introduced, we're architects. We're sort of very privileged to be leading the feasibility and concept and preliminary business case for the MBL Centre. And the MBL Centre is really quite a unique opportunity, very exciting project and collaboration for a state-of-the-art facility, multi-purpose facility here in Melbourne, Victoria. So at the moment, we're investigating various site options, we're developing concepts, and we're reaching out. We've had the opportunity to sort of build on our normal specialist consultant team, but bring in, as you say, the ASTN, yourselves, and the University of Melbourne to collaborate. As Shane touched on, we've been sort of tapping into the various faculties and understanding where research and development and technology and sport, arts and music, and there's a great opportunity here with the NBL Centre to for basketball, the NBL to be the facilitator for this really quite new and unique facility where it's the nexus of sport, leisure, and entertainment. So in some ways, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit experimental, and I think that's where the collaborations with the ASTN and the university have been quite unique. We've been running workshops to sort of tap into knowledge and insights to the latest sports technology vendors. So how can this facility be the vehicle for showcasing and harnessing the latest technology trends, whether that be venue technology or sports technology. So through the ASTN and your insights, we've been able to understand where the opportunities might be 5 to 10 years down the track. How do we future-proof this venue so it incorporates the latest technology? With Shane and his team, we've been breaking down opportunities through the various faculties and workshopping ideas and brainstorming. And it's all, at the moment, it's all coming together. We've got a demand analysis process been run by MI Global Partners, so we're sort of interviewing stakeholders. We're understanding what the various user groups and the use cases might be, and I guess what we're doing at the moment is creating a sort of vision for this facility to flourish. At its core, it's essentially an unparalleled basketball centre of excellence. So it's a place first and foremost for various forms of basketball. It's going to be a hub for esports, so it's going to be a facility where the NBL Oz Gaming can have their own home and compete in the NBA 2K League in the US. And as we know from the US, the NBA over there are very advanced in their ability and knowledge and access to technology. It's also a broadcast hub. We sort of coined the phrase a billion-seat arena. So we see this as a sort of opportunity, a window for new immersive broadcast experiences. There'll be a high-speed fiber connection, studio facilities. One of the potential sites we're looking at is actually home. It's one of the Dockland Studio sound stages. So there's an opportunity there to tap into what is this fully LED volume, an immersive backdrop. And if we start to incorporate smart floor systems as well, we've really got this quite unique facility and environment. And it's a hub of innovation, learning, and creativity. So some of the stakeholders, Creative Victoria, Vic Screen, we're looking at ways for this facility to open up and be more than just sport, tourism, arts and cultural events, and for the NBL to facilitate an array of tourist attractions in many ways. So yes, it's quite a unique and unprecedented facility that we're privileged to be part of.
So with that, Shane, effectively what you are then doing is, it's obviously Chris outlined that this is a real world project. So there's problems that are coming up, say. So you effectively, I take your role as a translation between the market and, let's say, the knowledge side at the university. Is that?
Yeah, that's probably a fair way to say. Yeah, we talked about, I suppose, the traditional model being this kind of technology push. This is really the reverse of that. This is the kind of market pulling opportunities from us. So for our role, our team's role is to kind of look at what are the opportunities coming from here? What opportunities are there for our researchers? What opportunities are there for our students? What opportunities are there for us to kind of devise something that's unique, something that's novel? And how can we potentially repurpose some of the work or the IP that we've generated previously? But also there's a whole range of other benefits that can flow from working with industry in this manner. There could be opportunities for spin outs, for commercialization, for ongoing investment in new ventures. And really, I suppose there's a lot of great things coming out of this for us. One of the real benefits, though, that the university is really, really keen on is that in technology, commercialization, innovation generally, there's quite an there's an abundance of STEM focused work, if you like, where there's not so much in the humanities and the social science side. So this NBL Centre project was particularly interesting to us because it also obviously hits those media and entertainment notes. And so for us, this is a great example of what we are trying to achieve through our precincts, that is this multidisciplinary collaboration. So within University of Melbourne, there's actually 3 different distinct faculties involved with this project. So it's being led by the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music, and being assisted by Architecture, Building and Planning, as well as the Faculty of Engineering and IT. So again, these are traditionally siloed kind of domains in their own right, all coming together, all chasing this kind of market-led, design-led kind of opportunity.
And Chris, coming back to you, you mentioned obviously it's not a traditional basketball stadium. There's elements of broadcasting, esports, experimentation. So, I mean, you guys have been involved in other facility projects, but I guess it's really that difference here to experiment. Is that right?
Absolutely, and I think we've got a great client with the NBL and the commissioner of the NBL, Jeremy Lolliger, who does really have foresight in terms of what this facility could be. And rather than traditional forms of esports where people sit there on consoles, we're thinking about actually the gamification of sport and active participation in esports and what are the trends there. So we're having conversations with some of Shane's team and ABP around what does that look like, and augmented versions of gaming within the arena, but potentially out in the precinct as well. So we're sort of looking 5 to 10 years down the track in terms of where the technology and the advances and the trends are, and we're trying for this not to be just another traditional conventional approach to a sports facility, because it's very much more than that. And I think the NBL are great facilitators for that, along with the state government stakeholder team that we've got at the moment.
Yeah, and Matt, Shane was obviously talking about this generating potentially investment. So putting your other hat on from an artesian point of view, is this type of activity where you test, where you trial, where you validate something that you can consider? You spoke about de-risking startups or de-risking some of these ideas.
Yeah, it's an interesting and very big topic for us, I suppose. I mean, we're obviously interested in investing in the best startups. And the best startups have usually tested their product, have been de-risked to some degree in all sorts of different ways. And I suppose it gets back to Shane's point as well of if the customer is there or it's demand driven, then these startups probably have a lot better chance of success. So any connection with these sorts of things that are real, where there's a lot of money behind them, that's obviously a lot more interesting with regards to each startup proposition that we might be looking to invest in. Sports tech in itself is interesting from Victoria's perspective, in that we are such a sporting city. And one of the ways we sort of like try and formalise the de-risking process, and this is where CDH, we believe, will add a lot to this process as well, given that there's so much more bench strength, I suppose, with all the players, and we're all a lot closer together and communicating a lot better. But we did, over the last 2 years, we've done a scale-up program for what we broadly call AI companies, and they're AI to differing degrees. But and the point here is that we make sure these companies do these programs where specific, parts of their business is addressed, wherever there's a weakness, or And it's generally about customer acquisition and actually just being able to relate to customers. But alongside all other sorts of things that are all different. And that's been incredibly successful. And 2 of those out of the 20 were actually sports tech companies. And there may be applications in these big projects for these companies, which is fantastic. But yeah, moving forward, and look, just before I go on, I mean the actual returns on this portfolio where we have actually specifically helped them in the areas where they really need help. It's up about 300% just on book value in 2 years. So we see it working, and then if we can actually supercharge it with the more connections through the Cremorne Digital Hub, and that's obviously the customers, academics, fantastic. I mean, if we can get sort of help there as well, and government too. So all those things together, we believe we're going to have a much more compelling pipeline for us to invest in, less risks we'll be taking. So essentially, as you point out, de-risked investments, and this is all due to everyone sort of coming together and looking to achieve the same sort of objective. So it's great for us, and I'm speaking purely from an investment and financial return perspective, not even talking about all the strategic returns that a lot of the other players are interested as well. Which is, I suppose, the government, universities, etc.
Martin, I wanted to offer a comment, if I might.
Yeah.
Maybe in 2 parts. The first part, something that was perhaps implied, but I didn't make very clear in my initial presentation, is there has been a retreat from companies doing much basic research in their own organizations. It's really the case that more and more of the research is moving to universities, where that work is now being done, which means that universities are even more helpful in trying to activate ecosystems and hotspots and brain ports and what have you than before. And I think one practice that the panel can tell me if this would work in Australia or not, but at Berkeley, we have a Professor Jennifer Doudna who received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2020 for her work in CRISPR, gene editing technology. So she's an extraordinary scientist and obviously very well recognized. But she has taken a leave of absence and is now involved in 3 different startup companies, typically as chief scientist initially. And the expectation is after the leave of absence, she returns to her lab at Berkeley and still works with graduate students, etc. But when she returns, she now has an understanding of the commercial side of a lot of these technologies that perhaps as an elite scientist, she may not have known about. And so as she conducts her further research and the people that work alongside her and learn from her, I think this is going to make more of this work more commercially interesting. It's still going to be excellent research, but it's going to potentially be more relevant because of that learned experience on the commercial side. And in turn, within Berkeley, the fact that someone of her eminence would voluntarily take a leave and go into the startup community also suggests that startups are legitimate areas for even the best scientists and engineers to work on. It's not for people who can't make it as a scientist at an elite university. It's actually its own valuable work. And I think that symbolism is very powerful in fostering the kind of dynamism and movement of knowledge that we're trying to create. And then my last point is that when CDH does have its unicorns and the big successes that come out of it, I think that'll be an important moment for what do those people then do? Do they find a way to give back? Do they find a way to mentor and coach the next generation of startups coming along? Or do they buy themselves a private island and remove themselves from Victoria entirely? In the first case, that itself, I think, has been a secret ingredient that has sustained Silicon Valley so well, is many of the people who have been tremendously successful have found many ways to, as investors, as coaches, as mentors, to really help nurture the next generation behind them.
Yeah, there's some good observations there, Henry. And I probably would agree that there certainly seems to be a growing kind of demand to kind of collaborate with universities for the R&D function. And I think that we certainly see in the kind of the funding landscape, governments are looking to leverage their investment dollar. And so looking to bring academics, industry, and that government funds together to really kind of chase that dollar and stretch that dollar further. And I think the universities are kind of more driven now, less by kind of publications and patent filings, but are really starting to be talking a language around impact. How do we actually create change in society, as opposed to just get some IP that rusts away in a lab somewhere? And so I think that's kind of opening up the dialogue and really connecting between kind of different parts of the ecosystem. And I think there's also a changing in the guard to some extent in terms of the traditional pathway for an academic. Historically, people have been chasing kind of tenure and looking at that research and that teaching and learning position, but there's a growing kind of focus on entrepreneurship and entrepreneurialism. And we certainly are seeing that here. We've recently done some work with Oxford, Cambridge, and MIT, looking at kind of those entrepreneurial pathways and how do we maintain our association and relationships with academics who might be a time in a teaching role doing research, then they move to industry, then they come back again. And so we're looking at it more of a life cycle. We're seeing a lot of, obviously everyone knows about university spin-outs, but we're actually getting to the stage now where there's a growing market of what we call spin-ins, where companies have transformed, pivoted,
yes,
and are coming back in again. So there's a lot of kind of movement that we're finding now. So we're doing some work with different ecosystems in Europe and North America, and in Italy, places like this, where we're seeing kind of these groups that have kind of exhausted the kind of the benefit of that knowledge, and so they're trying to bring this different division or this different team to a new place to get access to new expertise or new infrastructure or new markets. And so there's this kind of global kind of exchange of knowledge and sharing of knowledge that's being facilitated by these open innovation precincts. And I think that what we're seeing, we operate a program at Melbourne Uni called the Melbourne Accelerator Program. It's been going for about 12 years. It's the longest running one in Australia. And we're fortunate enough now, there some of the early entrepreneurs that were in the early cohorts are actually now coming back as entrepreneurs in residence and actually feeding back into that ecosystem and really helping the new cohorts come through. And so again, we're seeing this kind of closed kind of loop coming back. And so I think that there's a changing of the guards in terms of the attraction and also the viability of a career path that involves not just academic, but also kind of some more industrial entrepreneurial pursuits.
That sounds excellent.
Chris, do you have the freedom and flexibility to bring these new ideas into the project, or at what stage will the primary partner, the NBL, say, well, does that really work, or how can we deliver?
I mean, at this stage, we're very much opening up the kind of blue sky, the visionary thinking. The NBL have been extremely supportive around all of the ideas that we've been talking about. We're talking about tertiary education opportunities by connecting NBL production studio courses with the university and back with the broadcast studio facilities of the NBL. We are going through a process of understanding capital costs and operating costs and technology costs. But at this stage, it's very much a visionary, open-minded process. I guess we'll conclude the vision, and with that there'll be a scheduling of events where we'll look to sort of see beyond basketball how this facility can open up to a whole array of other opportunities, and that be whether it's a sort of tourism, arts and cultural events, education opportunities. There's classrooms, facilities that could be used and hired. And so we're just going through a process at the moment of evaluating and putting some costs and some feasibility around that. But the process with the MBL has been very open-minded and creative and welcoming of innovation and creative thinking broadly.
Yeah, okay. And Henry, what we just discussed, is this similar? Because I think at Berkeley you have also these entrepreneurial programs. I'm thinking of Skydeck and others. Is that similar? And do you have experience that these combinations have actually worked?
Yeah, Berkeley touts itself as the world's leading public research university. There's Oxford and Cambridge, and there's Harvard and MIT, and you might have heard of them, but they're all private. And Berkeley is really the leading public research university. And for a long time, that conveyed a lot of attitude about pure research and research for knowledge's sake. And there was a suspicion, I would say, of don't get too close to business because they're trying to make profit, which might corrupt the pursuit of knowledge. I very much resonate with Shane's characterization of the traditional view of the university as a repository of higher knowledge. And Berkeley suffered from that, I think, for quite a while, but it's really not the case anymore. And I gave a couple of examples already, and Martin, you just listed some more. At last count that I did, there were more than a dozen different funding mechanisms for undergraduates at Berkeley to get funding for a startup. So Skydeck is one of them, but it's only one of many. And you might think that's very inefficient. And why wouldn't you put it all in one place and let the best projects get the most money? And from an efficiency standpoint, there's an argument to be made there. But I think from an effectiveness standpoint, the nice thing is for a young entrepreneur, if you get a no from the first person, there are still 11 others you can go talk to. Yeah. And by the way, when you get that first refusal, you often get some interesting information and feedback that helps you, if you're any good, to polish it a little better, dig a little deeper. And the next time you come back, the story's a little farther along, maybe even a little bit more de-risked. Maybe you do find a few customers along the way and so on. And so in the process, I think you get more entrepreneurship out of there. And so on the Berkeley campus today, entrepreneurship is cool. It's sexy. It's one of the things students are excited about doing. And that wasn't the case. Some of us who are old enough remember the free speech movement and the Vietnam War and all the protests and all the rest. That was a different time. And today, entrepreneurship is very much sought after. And there are these social networks. And I loved what Shane was saying about how some of the early graduates are coming back now for the next cohort. And we're seeing that at Berkeley as well.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Henry. It's not about just one model to be the dominating model. I think in the variation is also, you call it efficiency or being efficient. We see this as ASTN, where, let's say, out of university, a group of early stage founders who do want to commercialize in sport precisely come to the ASTN because we can put them in contact with the market. And we've seen examples where this is, and again, there's examples out of Melbourne University, out of RMIT, who are partners of CDH, where this actually has worked, and then they move on. They maybe after finding their initial commercial customer in Australia, then they move to other markets. And the question about the US obviously came up, and for sports tech, that is a big market, undoubtedly. And we see this where companies have now moved on and received funding from overseas to access those markets. And so with that in mind, Matt, how do you tie into, because it's not only that there's one fund investing into a startup and the only investor, it's that sometimes a number of investors actually team up. So what are your connections to maybe other funding organizations overseas?
Yeah, I mean, look, as startups develop, and pretty much every startup that we invest in has global ambitions. And if they have global ambitions, they generally are then open to getting funding from offshore VCs or whoever. So we co-invest with all sorts of different people, and a lot of them are US VCs or Asian VCs. That's just the natural state of affairs. I think it's interesting, both Shane and Henry's comments about, you know, how Australia and on a small scale, I suppose, Victoria has developed in the startup ecosystem, and the different sort of dynamics that are coming through now, and the different thought processes of universities and VCs. I mean, you know, culturally, you might say Australia and the US are similar, but in the venture capital world, you know, it's only recently we probably have actually got similar sort of ways of thinking. I mean, Australia's always been very conservative and risk averse, and when we started raising money for VC funds, you know, 11, 12, 13 years ago, VC in Australia was a dirty word. So, and all the data we could use for early stage, you know, early stage investing in the truest sense of getting like a really big portfolio of investable companies, we could only use US data. You know, there wasn't an early stage investment landscape in Australia. So we're sort of like, you know, moving pretty quickly towards that sort of American way of thinking. And, you know, the fact that academics now are sort of, you know, getting involved in thinking about commercialization and startups in Australia is a big change. It's never been part of the natural culture of academics and universities. It would have said until recently. I mean, obviously there were things going on, and everyone's motivations were to do this and respond to the challenges that everyone sees, you know, in the world, and all the major impact issues, you know, climate change and health and all those sorts of things. But it's only recently in Australia that we've actually all started, you know, coming together in this way, I think. So yeah, we've still got a fair way to go. But yeah, obviously these big success stories, you know, when, as Henry said, when we do have these unicorns, and when they do have, when you know, foreign VCs are making money, then they start coming here, and then the whole sort of flywheel starts moving a little faster. The key for us, though, still is that we still need support to actually get all these things going and put the open innovation idea into practice in a lot more effective ways. But yeah, everyone's sort of, to use a cliche, coming along on the journey, but we're starting from a much different point. And all these examples out of the US, especially with regards to these, you know, incredible scientists getting involved in startups, is it will further change people's way of thinking here, I think, as well. But yeah, look, you know, to answer your question again, I mean, yeah, we've obviously got portfolio companies with global ambitions. They all have, and that's the beauty of technology. And you can find customers all around the world. Ones with only domestic visions or ambitions probably, you know, ideally need to change those. And we can help there as well with CDH to make those global introductions. You know, we're partnering with other hubs around the world. We've started with Japanese and Hong Kong hubs. But it's funny when you look at, and these hubs then have other connections to other parts of the world. But when you look at, their map of their connections, Australia still sort of looks like New Holland. Do you remember those maps where there was just like a white space? And those connections haven't actually been made yet, but very shortly there'll be lots of little arrows down to Melbourne, Cremorne, and that's the whole point of it. And ASTM, as part of that very important ecosystem and network, and definitely with the brand of sports in Melbourne. I mean, that's that works pretty well for everyone.
Yeah, and then I think, Matt, that's where we also align, because we always say a sports tech business in Australia is born global, but it has to thrive locally and validate before it can take advantage of that. So I think
I think that's interesting as well. I mean, Australia, it's a great market to test products, but it's not easy either.
No.
Customers in Australia are tough. They're hard, they're conservative, they're risk averse as well. So if you can actually break it, here, and you're successful here, it's a fantastic start. And then, obviously, you're in a great place to go global. It's obviously an advanced market here. People are, well trained and have a good background on their businesses and how they want to be successful. But it's not easy. But it's also great if you can actually break through and get customers in Australia and take it globally.
Yeah, and validate here.
Martin,
exactly.
if I may, one other thing startups in sports, I think, really need is data. And so in addition to funding and knowledge and all the rest, I think another important role is how can young companies who have important ideas for how to do something new and different, how can they get access to the data to really develop and test these things? In open innovation, it's a mistake to have to generate all of your own data. If there are ways you can partner and collaborate and gain access to others' data, and in return, you give them something valuable in return, some analysis, an algorithm, or some other way of interpreting. But particularly digitally based startups need data to be effective. Universities and their research programs, we also need data. And so we've talked a lot about the funding and the money, and that's very important, but we shouldn't lose sight of the data side of this. And it could be that in CDH and Victoria, you may be able to mobilize and access data more effectively in an area like, let's say, healthcare, than would be done in the US, where it's very complex, Byzantine, bureaucratic. It can be really, really hard to get access to healthcare data. So that's just another dimension as we think about ways to nurture and invigorate hotspots like CDH.
Yeah, I think that's key for the success of CDH, is to actually, and we recognize that, is to build up as much data as we possibly can. But it's probably for another discussion, is that, the whole world of data is changing as well, with generative AI and all those sorts of things. And AI companies we've invested in 2 years ago, they're already being disrupted with regards to the data they thought was valuable and probably now is just generally found. So it's a really dynamic and interesting thing, but the essence is that everyone needs as much as they possibly can to have a viable product in a lot of these digital companies, AI companies, etc.
Yeah. Let me bring in a question from the audience, because Tim asked a question that goes to Shane, and that's another aspect of the university startup collaboration, and this is about IP. So Shane, Tim's statement was that it used to be that universities were operating under a motto publish or perish, and he's now saying, listening to, it's now commercialize or perish. And given that the universities are publicly funded, should the IP they generate actually be more accessible to entrepreneurs?
Yeah, that's a tricky subject, and something that's always very, very sensitive for universities. I think the how much we keep, how much we retain versus how much we kind of put to use, that's the kind of question that's kind of very topical at the moment. And I think there's, talking in I suppose broad terms, there's been this growing change from this kind of just produce this IP. It doesn't matter if it finds a use in society, patent it, protect it, put it in the storage, so to speak. And so there's a discussion, there's a debate going on at the moment, and we're certainly trying to benchmark against our peers internationally about how much do we let go? How much do we, if we're going to spin out a company, a commercialization entity, how much equity do we retain in that vehicle? We need to give it its own kind of life, but we don't want to kind of throttle back by holding too much of the IP. It's a tricky thing. The other thing, I suppose, and we're finding, is that the money that's coming in for discovery, so blue sky, curiosity-driven research, is relatively diminishing as compared to the funding that's coming in for more industry-aligned or linkage funding, to use the term we use. And therefore, as part of, again, leveraging that funding, we're looking to bring industry partners along for that journey. And therefore, there's the question around, what rights the IP does the university hold and retain versus what rights get passed through to the industry partner who's also co-sponsoring it. So it's a moving feast right now, and there's a lot of good discussion going on right now about how best to manage it.
Good. Chris, there's a question. We're obviously talking about the basketball project here, but there's a question from Ben regarding future aquatic centers around the countries and around the country, and what do you think in terms of how can the local authorities best commercialize or commission them? Because obviously there's always the question of, do I need a 50-meter competition pool, or do I need an experience water park? Yeah.
It's a good question. I think a lot of sports and recreational facilities are recognizing that they've got to sweat the asset as much as possible, and I think we often find flexibility in how a venue can reconfigure, how technology comes in to enable various uses throughout the week. You don't want your venue or your facility left unoccupied and underutilized, and I think whether it's aquatics, whether it's NBL, whether it's the AFL, I think there is a real shift towards perhaps scaling down the size of venues and reducing capacity in certain venues, but looking towards more flexibility, more multi-purpose facilities, and really trying to get as much out of that venue and generate revenue in a whole host of different ways. And so there's certainly a trend towards moving away from empty seats and more towards technology, flexibility, and reconfiguration. And I think the councils, there's a bit of a lag there in the thinking, but I think that the message is sort of getting across slowly.
So, and coming back to the NBL project, that means there's different forms of basketball that is going to be enabled there. So there's obviously the full court, but then new forms, short forms.
That's right. There's 3x3 format, the 2x2, the 1x1. More intimate, broadcastable content. So it's all about content creation and the sort of flexibility and the technology that supports that. We're really keen to talk to sports tech vendors and startups who are exploring innovations in sports technology or venue technology that might augment and enhance the fan experience or operations or the team facilities, and whether that be volumetric video or player tracking, wearable technology, even holographic technologies. What if this centre in 5 to 10 years time could recreate a key game elsewhere in the world live, and you could come to this facility just to watch it live in a new immersive way. So I think we very much see this as a vehicle to enable startups and technology entrepreneurial inventions to sort of come to the fore. And it's sports technology symposiums as well. So we see this as a place that could showcase technology, could showcase the latest products, and be that testing ground, be that research and development tool, be the prototyping lab for this kind of ecosystem to grow and prosper.
Yeah. So this idea of the living lab, and there was a question earlier, how do startups, or how does anybody actually become aware of these applications or these opportunities? And it's effectively through challenges, right, Chris? That problems are going to be put forward, and people can respond to that. And then this goes back to the point Henry made. From an ASTN point of view, from the group on the group that's working together on the NBL project, ultimately we want to translate that into challenges that we're going to put out to the community to say, you can respond to this.
Absolutely. I think one of the scenarios we've envisaged with the NBL Centre is a facility that's kind of run and operated by the NBL, but it's leased out. It could be sport organisations or universities that come and use the facility, hire it for a day. It's got 15 to 20 stations where you've got testing and data analytics and capture of data, visualization of data, and anything that will help athletes get those kind of marginal gains that they need to succeed in sport. So in those stations, those vendors might change, but it's an opportunity for products to be tested and tried, and an experimental testing ground for sports technology. That's how we sort of see it.
Good. Okay. Just looking whether there are. Yeah, there was one question. Maybe we'll close on that for Matt, from Tom. And this was about putting on your hat, the artesian hat as a VC. What proportion of pitches being presented to you currently include AI as a key feature of their business?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we've actually, this might skew the numbers, we're actually seeking out AI companies specifically as part of our programs and as part of just part of our portfolio allocation and looking for deeper tech and AI companies. But having said that, I don't want to say most, but generally these days there is an AI feature in a lot, and it may be more than 50%. And I'd suggest that even companies that have a very thin AI connection are marketing themselves as an AI company. So you add that, and you're probably talking 75% with AI in the pitch, but obviously have to treat a lot of it with a pinch of salt. The specific AI, generative AI, companies, maybe 20, 25%. But yeah, everyone's got a little bit in there, and it might even increase. I mean, you're probably going to get like even more as a percentage, just because it's overriding so many things now. We do a lot of ag tech and clean tech investment. A lot of the ag tech has AI overlays, weather patterns, data collection. It's big, with regards to crop, soil, weather, all that. There's AI. There's AI in it, and companies that didn't have AI that we invested in 3 or 4 years ago are now obviously incorporating it. So there's that as well. And I don't want to say it's all seeing, all dancing, all the AI stuff, but yeah, it is starting to be apparent in a lot of a lot of different pitches.
Okay.
A big thank you to our special guests that have joined us today for our panel discussion. So a big thank you to Matthew, Chris and Shane for joining us. And obviously you can reach out to Shane, Chris or Matthew on LinkedIn or in other ways if you've got questions for the future or you would like to speak to them about other topics that may not have been discussed today. A big thank you too for Martin and Henry for hosting that segment. We will take a short break, and then after we come back, we will have a introduction of Open Innovation Challenge from Martin, and then we'll have our fireside chat with some new guests. So take a 5-minute break. We'll come back at around 12:55, but it depends on where you are in the world. I understand in Melbourne and in Australia, depending on where you are, that we'll just do a 5-minute break for everybody, and then we'll join back here for our afternoon session. So thank you so much for joining us once again to Shane, Chris and Matthew.
Thanks for having us, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Sarah.
Cheers, guys.